American Eagle Outfitters is a top American clothing store for young people. It was started in 1977 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The brand is known for its jeans, casual clothes, and underwear under the Aerie name. In July 2025, they started an ad campaign called Sydney Sweeney Has Great Jeans with actress Sydney Sweeney. This caused a big scandal because many people thought the ads and posters with their bold slogans were racist, pushed eugenics, and were too revealing. Can we use strategic uncertainty in marketing for good today? And how ethical is that approach? The company AEO was started by two brothers, Jerry and Mark Silverman. In 1980, they sold half of their company to the Schottenstein family. AEO is a public company, which means it has shareholders like BlackRock and Vanguard. Jay Schottenstein is a very strong supporter of Zionism. In October 2023, American Eagle Outfitters put an image of the Israeli flag on their billboard in Times Square, New York, after the Hamas attack on October 7th. This was seen as public support for Israel and made some pro-Palestinian groups upset, leading to calls for people to stop buying from the company. In the same year, a mezuzah was put up at the American Eagle flagship store in Times Square during an event organized by Chabad. This was shown as an act of Jewish pride, even though some critics connected it to Zionist symbols. In 2024, Schottenstein helped start the Fallen Heroes Fund, which gives money and emotional help to families of Israeli soldiers and rescue workers who died after the October 7th attack. This made his reputation as a supporter of Israel even stronger. This caused a big stir on social media, where the company was accused of supporting Zionism too much. It is said that Jay Schottenstein is a strong Zionist. He supports the Jewish National Fund, JNF, which some say helps pay for settlements in Palestine. In 2015, he gave $157,000 to Netanyahu's campaign, bought an $11 million house in Ashdod for Rabbi Yoshiyahu Pinto, and helps pay for projects in Israel. How fitting and right is American Eagle's latest ad campaign in a country with such a difficult past? For example, in Mobile, Alabama, in the early 1980s, African-American communities constantly faced the threat of racial hatred and violence. On March 21, 1981, 19-year-old African-American Michael Donald became the victim of one of the last lynchings in U.S. history. He was kidnapped, beaten, had his throat cut, and was hanged from a tree by members of the Ku Klux Klan. The crime was driven by racial hatred and was a response to a court decision where an African-American accused of murdering a white police officer was not convicted due to a jury that included black members. The leader of the local Ku Klux Klan chapter, Benny Jack Hayes, stated, "If a black man can get away with killing a white man, then we should get away with killing a black man." Henry Hayes and James Knowles, incited by this statement, lured Michael Donald into a car, pretending they needed help, drove him to the woods, where they brutally beat him, cut his throat, and hanged him from a tree in front of the Ku Klux Klan leader's house. That same night, two other Ku Klux Klan members erected and burned a cross on the courthouse lawn. Much more often, crosses were placed near the homes of murdered victims to intimidate relatives and neighbors. His body was found hanging from a tree on Herndon Avenue. This tragedy shocked the entire country and became a symbol of the fight against racism and impunity. A civil lawsuit filed by Donald's mother, Beulah May Donald, led to the bankruptcy of the United Klans of America organization in 1987. This was a significant milestone in the history of the fight against racial hatred in the U.S. The Ku Klux Klan experienced 3 waves of activity after the Civil War from 1915 to 1944 and in the 1960s. I'll remind you, the last time Klan members lynched an African American was just over 40 years ago. That was very recent. Why did the Ku Klux Klan burn crosses? Burning a cross is first and foremost a show of threat. It was used as a terrifying ritual against African Americans, Catholics, Jews, immigrants, and anyone the Ku Klux Klan considered enemies of white America. The bright fire at night in the shape of a cross is a powerful image of fear. Fake religious symbols. The Ku Klux Klan called itself a Christian organization, claiming that the fiery cross symbolized the light of Christ, supposedly purification and faith. But this was an attempt to wrap an act of violence in a religious shell to give it spiritual legitimacy. The ritual did not come from Christianity. Traditional Christianity does not use cross-burning as a ritual. This idea was likely inspired by romanticized images of Scottish clans, especially from Thomas Dixon's book The Clansman, where a burning cross calls people to action. This book became the basis for the film The Birth of a Nation, which turned into Ku Klux Klan propaganda. In 2024, the Ku Klux Klan exists as scattered groups using anti-immigrant rhetoric. And here we see a new campaign with Sydney Sweeney, where a young actress proudly talks about her roots. Isn't this an example of dangerous populism and a desire to profit from American xenophobia and racism? The big shift in how American Jews felt happened during the student protests against the war in Judea and Samaria. Back then, the left-wing groups, like LGBTQ+, African Americans, Latinos, Asians, and immigrants from the Middle East, supported this movement. At the same time, money started flowing to writers who were once on the sidelines, people others were shy to be openly linked with. This made the Jewish establishment really disappointed with the left. Bronze Age Pervert is a far-right writer who pushes ideas about eugenics and fascism through social media and his books. He looks up to Aryan cultures and supports selective breeding, even though he comes from a mixed Jewish and Romanian family. Curtis Yarvin, who often retweets BAP, also comes from a mixed Jewish and English family. It's pretty funny that the main thinkers behind eugenics and neo-fascism today hardly have any family ties to Aryans. Still, many respected and important people in politics and society try to hide their connections to these writers because they're still worried about their reputation. But now there's nothing to fear. Now you can be racist, xenophobic, and just not a very good person. The masks are off. And as my favorite blogger CoffeeZilla says, now, thanks to Trump and MAGA, any scam is okay if a person can make a lot of money from it and share their millions with the patriarchs. The main thing is that it's a huge scam, big and beautiful. Let's talk about eugenics in the holy writings of ancient wise men. We've already talked about how every Jew, unlike non-Jews, has two souls, a divine soul and an animal soul. The divine soul is a special gift that every Jew gets no matter how religious they are. While both souls have things in common, there's a huge difference between them. The animal soul is part of the klippot, shells or husks, which are the spiritual base of things that don't break the rules of the Torah. But the divine soul is part of God himself. In other words, the animal soul is just one of God's many creations. The divine soul is God himself. The clearest mention of this idea is in the Tanya, the main book of Chabad Hasidism, written by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. The Tanya says that every Jew has two souls, the Nefesh HaBehemit, animal soul, which all people have and is linked to physical desires, selfishness, and wanting material things. This soul comes from the Klippat Noga and can be fixed through spiritual work. And the Nefesh Elokit, divine soul, which is special to the Jewish people, is a part of God above, and is linked to divine light, wanting spirituality, holiness, and following the Torah's commands. The divine soul is seen as a special trait of the Jewish people, giving them a unique spiritual job to be a light to the nations, and fix the world by following God's commands and doing spiritual work. Next, in Lurianic Kabbalah, which became the base of Hasidic teachings, the soul is seen as a tool for tikkun olam, fixing the world. According to the Arizal, the souls of the Jewish people come from higher spiritual worlds than the souls of other peoples. This doesn't mean they are better, but it points to a special role in the cosmic order. In Kabbalah, the souls of Jews are linked to higher sephirot, like Chokmah and Bina, which makes them carriers of special spiritual power. According to Lurianic Kabbalah, there are sparks of holiness in the world that the Jewish people gather by following the commandments. This is the work of the divine soul. In Hasidism, the idea of two souls is also used to describe the inner spiritual fight. The animal soul wants physical pleasures, while the divine soul wants holiness and to be close to God. A person's job is to make the animal soul follow the divine soul, using its energy to do God's commands. So going back to our chat, in July 2025, AEO launched a campaign with Sweeney to promote the Sydney genes. In the American Eagle Jeans ad, Sweeney says, "Genes are passed down from parents to children, often deciding things like hair color, personality, and even eye color. My genes are blue." The ad also uses the slogan, "Sweeney has great genes," which plays on the two meanings of the word jeans, clothing, and genes, DNA. Videos that focused on her chest and the phrase, "Hey, eyes up," led to accusations of being overly sexual. This went against the campaign's stated goal of supporting the fight against domestic violence. The play on words with jeans, and Sweeney's image led to accusations of eugenics. Ella Yerman called the campaign Nazi propaganda. Liberal media criticized the campaign for pushing a cultural shift towards whiteness. Conservatives, including Trump, supported Sweeney, calling the criticism cancel culture and saying that Sydney had nothing to be ashamed of, that she really had good genes to be proud of, and she should show herself more often. Eugenics in the USA started in the late 1800s and early 1900s, influenced by Darwin's ideas, genetics, and thoughts about making society better. The main idea of eugenics was to make humanity better by carefully choosing who could have children and limiting births among groups they called undesirable. In the USA, this movement got a lot of support from scientists, politicians, and important public figures, especially during times of social change and worries about society getting worse because of immigration, poverty, and mental health issues. The ideas behind American eugenics came from Francis Galton, a British scientist who first used the word eugenics in 1883. Galton's ideas about passing down traits and making the human race better were popular in America, where they mixed with local social problems. One of the main people in American eugenics was Charles Davenport, a biologist who, in 1910, started the Station for Experimental Evolution at Cold Spring Harbor, New York. Davenport also created the Eugenics Record Office, which collected information about family traits and pushed for the sterilization of those they thought were unfit. Margaret Sanger, a leader in the birth control movement, connected her ideas with eugenics, believing that limiting births among the poor and unfit would make society better. Soon after, laws were passed and put into action. In 1907, Indiana became the first state to pass a law that made forced sterilization required for people with mental illnesses, criminals, and other undesirables. By the 1930s, similar laws were in place in 30 states. A big court case, Buck v. Bell in 1927, led to the U.S. Supreme Court supporting forced sterilization, with Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes saying, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough." As a result, by the 1970s, about 60,000 people in the U.S. had been sterilized. Eugenics also affected anti-immigration laws, like the Immigration Act of 1924, which limited entry into the country based on racist ideas about different groups and nationalities. The movement got support from both scientists and the public. Eugenics was taught in universities, funded by groups like the Rockefeller and Carnegie Foundations, and made popular at fairs, fittest family contests, and in the news. Its influence on Nazi Germany. American eugenics greatly influenced Nazi ideas and policies, especially in the 1930s, when Germany was creating its race laws. German scientists and politicians studied the American approach with great interest. Nazi leaders, including Adolf Hitler, read the works of American eugenicists such as Madison Grant, whose book, The Passing of the Great Race, Hitler called his Bible. German race theorists adopted American ideas of racial hygiene and sterilization, changing them to fit their beliefs in the superiority of the Aryan race. The German sterilization law of 1933 was largely inspired by American laws. German officials even talked with their American counterparts, including staff from the Eugenics Record Office. The Nazis went further, sterilizing about 400,000 people by 1945, including people with mental disorders, physical disabilities, as well as Jews, Roma, and other non-Aryans. Before World War II, American and German eugenicists were closely connected. For example, the Rockefeller Foundation funded research in Germany, including at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics, which later became a center for Nazi racial research. German scientists visited the USA, and American eugenicists published articles in German journals on racial hygiene. While American eugenics mainly focused on sterilization and limiting immigration, the Nazis took these ideas to the extreme, carrying out mass killings through euthanasia for the unfit and the Holocaust. However, the initial idea of cleansing society by getting rid of undesirable people came from American practices. Now let's talk about whether this jeans ad has xenophobia towards the actress herself. The term shiksa has historically had a xenophobic meaning, marking a non-Jewish woman as an outsider, and often linking her to being sexually available or a moral danger, something disgusting. In art and media, the image of the shiksa was sometimes used to explore ideas of assimilation, forbidden desires. For example, when you want something but know it's wrong, because according to Jewish law, your children with a shiksa won't be fully Jewish, and cultural conflicts. As for Sydney Sweeney, clear examples of her being sexualized are not uncommon. In the show Euphoria, created by Sam Levinson, Sweeney's character, Cassie, is shown as very sexualized. The way the actress looks sexy in this show confirms the shiksa stereotype, the desirable blonde with blue eyes. An article in The New Yorker said that the American Eagle campaign showed her as the classic big-breasted blonde, a made-up beauty ideal, which reminds people of the shiksa idea. Sydney Sweeney has great genes. This, sadly, falls under the shiksa stereotype. The ad didn't show Sydney giving a monologue on Broadway or getting a Nobel Peace Prize. It only showed her chest and backside. This is too little to convincingly talk about genes. Its focus on Sweeney's genes and the perfect image of a female that a deeply married boss might sometimes take to Aruba can be seen as hidden xenophobia. All this fuss actually made AEO's stock go up, adding $400 to $500 million to its market value. The AEO campaign really got the attention of conservative folks, using some pretty questionable and not-so-nice marketing. But then again, when has marketing ever been super ethical and morally perfect? It also showed once again that American Jews have completely moved away from the Democratic Party's ideas. Now, American business people of Jewish background only support MAGA and the far right.